This morning we'll deal a little bit with the Parsha, and I have what I think is a very beautiful idea based on an idea that I saw in a sefer called Shvilei Pinchas, which is Pinchas Friedman, Belzer Chassid. Very beautiful idea. So we know that in this week's Parsha, amongst the many amazing things that are in this week's Parsha, and in this week's Parsha, really the Parsha, the mode of the tone of Sefer Dvarim changes, and that it goes from Musar now to preparation, in the sense that it starts to review the Torah and to review the Mitzvos, and to make the final preparations of what is going to be needed in order to be able to settle into the land of Israel. One of the things that the Torah teaches us is Ki yiyeh b'cha evyon me'achad achecha b'achad sharecha v'artzcha asher Hashem lekecha nosin lach. When there's impoverished people, so then the Torah commands us how we have to deal with poverty. The way we have to deal with poverty is that lo sa'ametz es levavcha, you can't harden your heart. V'lo sikpos etz yadcha me'achicha evyon, you can't close your hand from your brother who is impoverished. Ki pasoach tiftach es yadcha lo, you have to open up your hand to him. You have to give him what he is missing. Be careful with this, and to make sure that you take care of your brother who is impoverished, and you give him what is due to him. If you look carefully at this section, it's interesting that it doesn't just say that you have to give him tzedakah, but it says, Lo sikpos es yodcha. Yodcha, don't close your hand. And then it says, Ki pasoach tiftach es yodcha. You have to open up your hand. Now, we have many commandments in the Torah that are commandments of doing, action. It doesn't talk about hands. For example, when the Torah tells us that we have to take a lulav and esrog, it says to us that we have to take for ourselves, ulekachtem lochem. But it doesn't say ulekachtem lochem with your hand. When it says that you marry a woman, when you take a woman, it doesn't say you have to do it with your hand. It's understood that you have to give her something and put it in her hand, but we don't talk about the hand. But specifically by the mitzvah of tzedakah, it seems to accentuate and to focus on the hand. So we have to wonder, why does a hand take such an important role in the mitzvah of tzedakah? That's question number one. Question number two is that this causes us really to question why tzedakah is such a fundamental mitzvah. You know, our rabbis tell us that the mitzvah of tzedakah is shkula, it's equal to the commandments of the Torah. And it gets a person labeled in the Zohar and in Midrashim as a person who is not a descendant of our forefathers. When a person is hard-hearted and is achzari and doesn't help out other people, he's put in a very, very negative light by our sages. And we have to wonder, why is this mitzvah considered such a fundamental mitzvah? And why is the non-observance of this mitzvah considered something that is wrong in its very core? So let's look at the pasuk very carefully. The pasuk says, Lo sikpots es yadcha me'achecha evyon, that you shouldn't close your hand to your brother who is impoverished. Ki pasoach tiftach es yadcha lo, because you will open up your hand to him.
Yes. And where are you going?
The Medrash says an amazing thing. The Medrash says,
okay. What? Tomorrow.
The Medrash says, love that mute button. The Medrash says that when you come into the world, when you look at a baby is born in a fetal position, and a baby is born with their fists clenched. And the statement that the baby is making is as if to say, it all belongs to me, it's all mine. It's wrapped into himself, tightly fisted. When a person dies, their hands are wide open, as if to make the statement that lo nachalti min ha'olam hazeh klum, that I didn't acquire anything from this world. When we're born tight-fisted. When we die in a way that's open. And maybe that's what the pasuk is saying to us. Don't harden your heart. And don't harden your heart from your brother who's impoverished. Don't live your life with clenched fists like you were when you came into this world. Don't stay with the attitude, it all belongs to me. Why? Because you need to know, ki pasayach tiftach es yad chalai. Because in the ends, your hands are going to be open anyway. And in the end, you're going to have to admit that none of this belongs to me. None of this that I've acquired in my lifetime, none of these acquisitions, none of these material things, in the end, none of them belong to me. If you're going to live in your lifetime with a clenched fist, if you're going to live like you were when you were a baby coming into this world, understand that there is no advantage to that. You're not going to walk away with anything. Because in the end, pasayach tiftach loi. In the end, your hands are going to be open. If you don't open them willingly in your lifetime, then as you leave this world, they are going to be opened against your will. But in the end, ki lo b'moso yikach hakol, in the end, you're not taking any of this with you. In the end, none of this is going to the grave with you. None of this is going to live past you. And if that's the case, then better you should open your hands now, open them willingly, open them because you want to, because if you don't, ki pasayach tiftach loi. Because in the end, what's going to happen is it will be opened for you. The pasuk is teaching us an amazing concept. That if every person is born, we start off our lives selfish, self-centered, focused on ourselves. And what's meant to happen through our lifetime is ki pasayach tiftach. We're meant to open up. We're meant to learn how to give. But if we don't, we'll be taught what it means to give. In the end of our lives, our hands will be opened against our will, and it'll all be gone. I'll tell you something amazing. Let's take it one step further. Because one of the fundamental aspects of Torah and Mitzvos, which we have in our shiurim on Pirkei Avos discussed very often, is the necessity for a person to be able to go against his nature. We've spoken recently about the conversation that took place with Moshe and the angels. And what Moshe was saying to the angels is that when they complained that the Torah didn't belong with the human beings, Moshe asked the angels, do you have jobs? Do you have parents? Do you need the Torah? Because you don't have a nature. And therefore, you don't need a Torah to go against your nature. You don't need a Torah to teach you how to battle your nature and to go against your nature, to rise above your nature. A human being needs an isayon, he needs a test in order to be able to teach him how to be able to break a nature, how to be able to go beyond the nature. The way to be able to break our negative midos is, as the Rambam says, that a person has to go to the opposite direction. We live our lives on one side, and then we want to change ourselves. And the only way to change ourselves is to pull like a tree, to pull it completely in the opposite direction. And eventually it ends up into the middle. We have to go to the opposite extreme in order to be able to strengthen and to figure out who we really are. God comes to Avraham Avinu, and he says to Avraham Avinu to take his son and to kill his son on top of a mountain. Avraham Avinu was given a test that went completely against his nature. The Ish Chesed, the man of kindness, was told to do something that was so hard-hearted, so filled with achzarias, because in being able to go against his nature, that's where he showed his greatness. That's where he was able to achieve his greatness. We know another principle. We know a concept called kol haschalos kashos. All beginnings are difficult. Most people explain that principle, kol haschalos kashos, is that it's very difficult to get started. You know, you can come up with good ideas. I've known many an idea man, a person who has ideas and ideas and ideas. They'll call you at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, Rabbi, I've got this great idea. But to be able to implement ideas, that's a whole nother thing. To be able to actually do something, to be able to actually carry something through, that's much more complicated. Kol hascholos kashos, we usually translate is that to get started is always difficult. There's always challenges, there's always things that stand in our way, obstacles that make it difficult for us to start. But I think maybe there's another pshat. Maybe the other understanding of kol hascholos kashos is that not only is it hard to get started, but getting started is koveya, how the rest of the project and the rest of this thing is going to be. How you begin is going to set the tone for what's going to happen after that. How you wake up in the morning is going to set the tone for what the rest of the day is going to look like. How you begin learning a certain thing, the first shear, the second shear of the beginning of some kind of project of learning that you're planning to do, that's going to be koveya. It's going to set the tone for what the rest of it's going to be. And that's why hascholos hakashos, they're so difficult because they're fraught with such challenges. They're fraught with such an importance. They're so fundamental. And that's why kol hascholos kashos, because when you begin something, so then it is so weighty, it is so huge because it is going to color the way everything else is going to be. If we're born with clenched fists, that means that really is a part of our nature. That means that's the way we start our lives. We start our lives focused on ourselves, focused on our pleasures, focused on our own acquisitions. We start our lives as selfish human beings. We start our lives with self-preservation. We start our lives with self-centeredness. And that's our haschala, that's our beginning. Which means that we need to expend a tremendous amount of energy during our lifetime in order to be able to break that nature, in order to be able to go against that nature. Since this is in essence the foundation of the negative traits of a person, if you look at many of the things that we have, many of the negative midos that we have, so many of them are founded on the concept of our own self-interest and of pleasing ourselves and of making ourselves more comfortable. So then breaking that self-centeredness, breaking that selfishness, that is our ultimate challenge in our lifetime, is to be able to decentralize our focus on ourselves, to be able to step away from ourselves and to be able to step outside of ourselves. Therefore, if we can lick this, we can lick so many of our negative characteristics and our negative traits. And that's why if a person doesn't engage themselves in tzedakah, in charity in their lifetime, if a person doesn't open their hands in their lifetime, so then they're considered that they're not a descendant of the avos, of the forefathers. Because that was the whole essence of our forefathers. Avraham Avinu was trained to go against his nature. His greatest challenge was not just to develop his nature, but now to break his nature. Yaakov Avinu was given a challenge that he had to lie. He had to stand in front of his father, dressed up as his brother, standing there in a Purim costume, pretending and charading that he was really his brother. He went against his very nature. Titein emes liYaakov, truth to Jacob. But that was in order to be able to shape and to make Yaakov into the giant that he was. If a person can't go against their nature, if a person can't break that selfishness, that self-preservation which prevents them from reaching out to others and from sharing their greatness with other people, so then such a person is not connected to the avos. If you can't unclench your fists, if you can't go against your nature, then you're not really Mizari Yisrael. Because that's what our forefathers set to be a fundamental part of the existence of a Jew. That's what the Torah is meant to do to us. The Torah is meant to teach us how to have the strength to be able to go against our natures. And that's why hands feature so heavily in tzedakah. Because our hands, our actions, our things, we have to work in such an incredibly hard way to be able to go against that nature. And that's why we say that it's shkula, that it's equal, the mitzvah of tzedakah is equal to the rest of the commandments. Because if you can do this commandment, if you can do tzedakah, if you can go against that nature and give to other people, so then you can break your nature, you can go against your nature, you can rise above that nature. Not only in this commandment, but in every single thing that God is expecting of us. And that's why it's so critical. Because if we can open our clenched fists, so that Hashem can do that to us also. If we can go against our natures, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu can go against his. The whole concept of the Godless, of the greatness of Tchias HaMesim, of the resurrection of the dead, is that God has made a decision and he can go against that decision. He's taken a person out of this world and he can put a person back into this world. A Roifei Chaylim, God's made a decision and he can now undo that decision. He can go against that decision. That's the Godless. To be able to go against the plan, to be able to turn it around. If I can do that in my life, then I can expect that God is going to deal with me the same way. If we want to see a Yeshua and a Geula, that means that we want God to turn this pattern of existence around, then I have to show him that in my world I can do that also. We've spoken and will speak many times about the concept that if a person, let's say, gives the benefit of the doubt, then God gives them the benefit of the doubt also. And we always question that. If you remember, we talked about this. And we questioned it. We said, what do you mean God gives the benefit of the doubt? The benefit of the doubt means you have a doubt, and now I'm giving you the benefit. But God doesn't have any doubt. What it means is that God deals with us in the way that we want to be dealt. The way that we set up to run our world, that's the way God runs our world. If I in my world judge people very tightly, if I in my world have no patience for people, if I in my world, I give no room for people to be able to operate, then God says, good, that's the way you set up your world. That's the way you set up the rules of judgment in your world. I'm going to judge according to your rules. It's not a punishment. It's not that God's taking it out on us, but that God is saying, if that's the way you run the world, that's the way you run your little world, then that's the way I'm going to judge within the context of your world. If I have the ability to step outside of myself, if I have the ability to be able to go against my nature, then God says, great. Then when I judge your world, I'm going to judge it that way also. I'm also going to step outside of the nature. I'm also going to step outside of the boundaries. And maybe that's also what the Pasuk is saying. The Pasuk repeats the word, Pasayach Tiftach, that God, and we translate it as God will surely, because you will surely open up your hands to him, but maybe it's saying something more. Maybe it's saying that if Pasayach, then Tiftach, that if we open up our hands, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to open up his hands to us. If we're Pasayach, if we open up our hands and give to others, then God is Pasayach es yodecha u'masbia l'chol chayrotzen. Then God is going to open up to us also. And that perhaps what the Pasuk is teaching me, and the critical nature of this mitzvah of tzedakah, is that it's not just about giving and sharing and taking care of other people, but that the critical nature of the mitzvah of tzedakah is nobody wants to give away what belongs to them. Nobody wants to put their lives in danger. Nobody wants to worry about if I give it away, I'm not going to have it for myself. Self-preservation is something that's basic to our lives. Worrying about me, im ein ani li, me li, that's basic to our lives. We've learned that in Pirkei Avos. But when I can step beyond that, and I can say, you know what, I'll be taken care of. I don't have to worry. There's enough to go around. And if I use what I have correctly, I can not only take care of myself, but I can take care of others also. If I have the ability to step outside of myself in the midst of tzedakah, then I have the ability to step outside of myself in many, many other situations. And even though so often it's easier to make a decision that's going to make me happy, I have the strength and ability to be able to put other people's needs before my own, and God and the world's needs before my own. The mitzvah of tzedakah is a gateway mitzvah. The mitzvah of tzedakah is taking that first midah, that first negative characteristic that we came into the world with, and breaking it in half. And if I can do it in tzedakah, then I can do it in everything. And if I can do it in everything, so then I can reach a place of greatness, and I can set up a world that God deals with me and our nation and our world in exactly the same way. My thoughts. I think it's a beautiful idea. It's
pretty powerful.
Something to chew over on Shabbos. The idea is so much bigger than tzedakah. The idea is really about that if I can push myself in one thing, then I can push myself in many things. You know, a lot of times the reason why we're not successful in pushing ourselves, we're not successful in raising ourselves, is because we focus on so many things. And it's almost impossible to be able to do that in so many areas. But if you excel in one area, if in one thing you're able to push yourself and to be able to climb over a mountain, so then you have learned that ability now. You have that midah. And now you can apply it to other things. And that's why the mitzvah of tzedakah is so critical. It's not about helping people. We do understand, of course, that if God wants a person to be taken care of, a person's going to be taken care of, and you're not really giving them anything. You know, most of us have this thing, a little bit like a God complex. You know, like when we give tzedakah to another person, like we think, oh, look, I helped that person. You didn't help that person. Because if that person was supposed to walk away with $5 today, they were going to walk away with $5. You know who you helped by giving them the $5? You helped yourself. Turnus Rufus and Rabbi Akiva once had a conversation. Turnus Rufus says to Rabbi Akiva, if your God loves the Jews, why did he create poor Jews? So Rabbi Akiva smoothly answers him back and he says, to save the rich ones from hell. Because the people that have it, to be able to put them in a position that they use their money correctly and they step outside of themselves to help others. It's not to save the poor people. That's not why there's a mitzvah tzedakah. It's to save the rich people. The poor people will get whatever they're supposed to get. If they don't get it from you, they'll get it from somebody else. But if you blow an opportunity, you have a chance to give to somebody and you don't give to them, so then you have not given to that person. You don't have to worry. You didn't kill that person. What you've done is you've impaired yourself because you had an opportunity to grow, to break out of yourself, and you lost that opportunity. Okay, beautiful.